So, thank you everyone so much for joining us today. Actually, we were expecting a much lower attendance, so I'm really happy to see that we have so many people to join us today. Before we start, I have left a poll for everyone to fill in. If you could quickly answer it, there's two questions there. It'll help us to make sure that we shape today's session a little bit better. I'll just pause for a few moments while we wait for everyone to find it and answer it. Also, if you join, or you can answer it as you go along as well.
I like this, given our theme is research. We love a poll, so it's real-time data.
Okay. Also, if you look at the bottom, there is a Q&A section to ask any questions. So we will do our best to answer those as we go along. So I'll just wait just a couple more seconds for everyone to... It's a really good diversity.
Oh, yeah?
Of people, yeah. Okay, cool. Okay, great. Let's get started. So let me start off with a quick intro. And then we can get into our subject today, which is market research for social entrepreneurship. So my name is Sakib Mirza. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Vodworks. As some of you may know, Vodworks is an international software company operating in a multitude of industries. One of the areas we come across as a business on a regular basis is working with startups, helping them to build things like their initial prototypes, proof of concepts, and the first version of their software products, and then taking those to market. So in the last couple of years, we've been doing a lot of work in social impact, in the social impact sector, working with fantastic organizations such as Impact Hub, which is represented by the wonderful Melanie today. One consistent theme that we have seen regularly across both private startups, as well as social impact companies, is the key need to identify their target markets effectively. And of course, the impact of not doing this can be quite costly sometimes. So historically, market research was a fairly expensive exercise that required a great deal of manpower. However, with the introduction of more innovative methods that Sania will talk a little bit more about, as well as the use of technology, the access to the fundamental requirement, this fundamental requirement of business has become far, far more cost effective. So today's session is inspired by our experiences in this. And I'm very grateful to be joined by two incredible women who have in-depth knowledge in both the market research and social impact sectors. So that's Sania and Melanie. So I did say I would keep it short. So I've been told in the past I have a history of butchering introductions. So let me pass over to the ladies to introduce themselves directly, and then we can get started on today's webinar. Melanie, let's start with you. If you could just say a few words, and then perhaps Sania afterwards. Over to you, Melanie.
Great. Thank you so much, Sakib. So yeah, it's my great pleasure to be here. So I'm Melanie. I am the Director of Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Impact Hub Phnom Penh. I've been working here for the past 5.5 years, and I had the chance to meet a lot of incredible young entrepreneurs who are solving Cambodia's pressing issues related to environment, climate change, education, healthcare. So over the past 5.5 years, we support teams at different levels, some like really pre-incubation to growth stage to actually scale up stage. And every time actually we need to integrate some market research approach to always like redefine the product, understand better the customer needs. And so I feel like this is really an interesting topic to cover today. And I hope it can also benefit some of the people in our community. So really nice to meet you all. We're going to also use some of the case study from our current tourism incubator. So I'm going to talk later about it. So my pleasure to be with you, and over to Sania.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. And yes, I think Melanie and Sakib have given really wonderful introductions about research and how it can be used. So I'm Sania Haq. I've been in research for over 10 years now, been at AudienceNet for the last 5 of those years. And research has both the market and the social research elements. So from the market side, I work a lot with well, quite fun stuff in the music space, music and entertainment. So working with music labels, streaming companies, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Music artists. So that's all really fun, and another area aspect that I'm really passionate about. But the reason I guess I got into research was the power I saw and from a kind of social impact point of view. So I do a lot of work with government here in the UK, some internationally, lots of NGOs, international NGOs looking at things like social cohesion or the refugee crisis and things in that. So I'm incredibly passionate about what research can do for society. Also in terms of using it as a way to give voice to the experiences of lesser heard populations, so be they minority ethnic groups or religious groups, and again using it to tell those stories. So yeah, real pleasure to be with all of you here today. Sakib, if I could have the screen share. Oh, I do now. And just to say, I guess my involvement as well with the Vodworks team over the last little while is some of their initiatives in mental health, and we're kind of working on a little music meets mental health app, if you will. So it's been quite fun to then look at that myself as well. How can we use research there? How can we be dynamic? So hoping we can pass on some of those learnings and other things over to you. So hopefully we can see my slides okay. Yeah, I think everyone's good. Okay, so as we said, we want to make research accessible to everyone so we can hopefully apply it. Some of you may already be doing it, as Melanie's saying. It's just about thinking about those principles. Obviously, there's still, and I don't want to do myself out of a job, but there will be a reason why maybe some companies still come to us, so my bigger clients, where you need stuff that's really robust, and you have to think about all of those things where you might need a bigger research company, but then again, that comes with budgets and stuff. And as a social enterprise, at this point, you may not be able to do that. So it's us kind of giving you a framework that you can apply the principles wherever you're at yourself. Oopsie, sorry, let me just go on to the next slide. So obviously this is us. So starting broad first of all, okay, in a really simple way. So what is market and social research? So it's quite fun. I mean, I always tell my team, it's a bit like being a detective. So it's basically you're searching for information on a particular subject. And that's essentially what it is. It's an exploration of that. And in its simplest, in terms of the market and social research world, which is, I guess, the more commercial side of research, you also have academic research, but our whole thing is about supporting decision making. So our research has to be actionable. I can't go and give my clients a really nice story, but then not, hey, what should they do about it? So it's about that. That's how we kind of sort of differ a little bit from academic research, which is often more in depth and in some elements. The primary side of research, so that's essentially where you're actually actively going and getting information from your audience. So you're getting that different ways of doing it. So that's primary research. That's broadly split into these two elements of qualitative and quantitative research. Now, if we start with the qualitative side, so that's where you've got less people, it's more in-depth, it's more of a dialogue, it's open-ended, it's often exploratory. It's less about putting numbers to something and quantifying things. So that's the qualitative side. And then on the flip side, you've got quantitative research, which is very much about measurement and numbers and robustness in terms of how many people you're speaking to, and then being able to make claims about the wider population with confidence based on that. So it's important that that's done in that manner. Questions there are more direct. So often, you have your yes and no's, or you have your grid questions. The important thing there is that you can't really leave room for, I guess, ambiguity, because if someone misinterprets what you're asking, you could just be collecting data on not the right thing. So you want to think carefully, is this question being understood? I do a lot of research across the globe, so we might have certain research in one country, but actually we need to be like, well, is this going to be understood correctly in a different country? Is it likely to offend someone, or do they see something slightly differently? So we're very mindful of all of that. Then, as Sakib hinted to, with now tech and what we've got on the platforms and the different information you can get from analytics or app usage or other things, you've got this whole host additionally of secondary data that you can use. There's been a lot of conversation over the last few years about how data is the new oil, etc. So there's lots of that that you can use. That's what we'd call secondary, more behavioral data, where you're not actually getting it from people by asking them the questions, but you're observing behaviors and stuff. Secondary data could also be primary research, not to confuse primary research, but that's been done maybe by someone else previously. So you might use that to size your market or to understand and be like, oh, this research in 2018 said this. I didn't do it, but I can use that to support my case for whatever I'm doing. Okay, what can research help with? So I think the basic thing we know is the target audience. So it's understanding, it's a range of things, and that's the beauty, and that's what I want to kind of get across. It's from understanding your target audience. Who are they? You know, how many of them are there potentially for your services or your products? You know, you might want to start with, well, what do they need? Actually, if you want to target a particular audience in a particular area, you might be like, right, I just want to focus on my audience and I figure out what they need and build something for them. Or it might be you build something and then you want to figure out who your target audience is. But knowing your target audience is really important, as we all, I think, know. So that's one of the major things it can help with. Then once you've got users, understanding their behaviors, especially if it's your initial pilot users, then you might want to know, well, how are you doing relative to your competitors? What's maybe the share or the size of the market that you hold, again, relative to those. So whether you're a streaming company, obviously on a bigger scale, but whatever you're doing, you want to know, well, how are you doing? Where are you in that race? Marketing and advertising is a really, really important bit that we do a lot of research in. So whether you're wanting to test communications piece, is it getting the message across about your product or service? Even things like the colors, etc. You know, you can use research for that. Then refining your product. So you might get some research, a user research, and be like, well, actually, they're not using this the way we thought. Let's refine it. And then the last thing that I think is quite important here is the evaluation of the impact of what you're doing. Especially if you're an SME or you're a social enterprise, you might have funders that you need to go back to and say, hey, these are the metrics that we're measuring our success on, and this is how we're doing. So it can play a really valuable role there too. So this hopefully is a fun, like for those of you that are into racing cars or anything, but it's a sort of visual display of how research works. And what I wanted to show here is that it can be done, yes, multiple different sort of elements of research, but they can be done throughout the whole life cycle of your project. Now we've got this ending at the evaluation of impact. Of course, you would continue, but it's just to kind of visually show. So at the start, like I mentioned, you might want to understand your audience and then build something around their needs, or, you know, get a sense of that. Then you do your initial user behavior testing, maybe with a pilot group. Then marketing and advertising before you launch that more widely. By this point, you might want to know how you're doing against competitors. You might, you know, based on that, refine your product. If you think actually you're not doing as well, or actually you're doing better, whatever it might be. Again, you then might want to remarket and advertise because you've made changes. Again, understand user behavior and then evaluate your impact. So yeah, hopefully showing you how you can do it at different points. So this, went back and forward trying to figure out how to show this in a very simple way. There's a lot that goes behind this, and it's you know, it's not an easy judgment call, but hopefully this gives you some idea. So when you're thinking about your research design and your approach, meaning how should you do the research, who should you include, what should you cover? If you think about it sort of in this way, that will help you. So how robust do you need your research to be? So does it need to be scientifically watertight? Like, for example, we do stuff that goes into the media, which is like the public feel this way. We can't get that wrong because, you know, we'll get in trouble. But no, you have to be very, very sure there. So you want to be super robust in the way you approach that. That's where you might need a company such as mine to come in and do that. But the more robust you then go, that you're required to go, the more formal your research sort of needs to be. Again, an organization like mine, and just loosely based, the more that happens and the more costly it can become as well. So you'll decide your final approach. We often say this, what is the you know, what's the North Star? What's the kind of best thing? In an ideal world, you'd love to be able to do X. And then you start to think pragmatically about, well, actually, what's possible within the time, within the budget. Actually, how much information do I need? Do I need to have spoken to like 1,000 people, or is it okay for me to speak to less? Just being aware, like we said, we want to in the marketing for this, cover the do's and the don'ts. So lots goes into this decision making, but if first of all you can kind of land on actually how formal or informal do you need to be, that's a great important starting point, and then you can start the actual elements of your design of the research. So sampling is one of the complex elements of what we do, but I want to get across that it's important that you think about it, but it shouldn't be scary because it's kind of a very basic principle if you look at it in that way. So this is simply, well, who should you include in your research? So as I said, when we're doing national research, what the thing I love about this field, this discipline, is we are of course all different, but what it shows us is that we're actually a lot more similar than we think. So to robustly be able to, do representative research, or let's say here I'm based in the UK, so, or even in most countries, you only really need 1,000 to 2,000 people to research with them quantitatively, for example, to then be able to say with confidence, X amount of the population feel this way about this. Now, the science behind that is you can't speak to 1,000 people who are just not representative. So let's say just all young people in London, that is never going to be obviously representative of the UK population. So you have to think carefully about being representative of the population on the key demographics or variables. So when we're doing this sort of research, it's age, gender, region, and socioeconomics. Once you get that right, you speak to the right numbers of people, you can say something with confidence there. So the UK population with, let's say, 50 million plus adults, we only really need to speak to 1,000 of those plus slightly to be able to, say something confident. So thinking about it that way hopefully makes it less daunting. But then when you're doing your research, of course, you can have less and less people because you're not looking at the whole population, you're looking at a subgroup and stuff. So you can bring those numbers, of course, down. Qualitatively, you start with smaller samples, but there is a science behind that too. So roughly we say if you speak to about 8 people who are sort of similar-ish in those key characteristics, then findings start to converge. And it's quite fun because we'll often do things like focus groups or interviews, and you'll find after a while people are basically saying similar things. They're telling the same jokes even, and like you as the researcher, you obviously each time need to pretend like it's the first time you're hearing it, so you're reinforcing that for people. But that principle again, that we're often a lot more similar than we think. So to then, that's the kind of broad thing. So let's think specifically. So what I want to get across here is think about who you should include. Make sure it's not biased, that you've not just got just all women or just people that are likely to be positive about your product, or on the flip side, just negative about product, right? It's not giving you a balanced view. So think about it, but don't get overwhelmed, because the more you start trying to include everything here, the more challenging it becomes. And you have to make decisions, even for my government clients or whatever it might be, we have to make decisions and say, well, look, we just can't reach people who are just super offline here or that particular demographic because it's too expensive or it's too difficult within the budget. So everyone makes those decisions. It's just the trade-offs and being pragmatic there. And yes, thinking about the key characteristics that impact you. So for example, I mentioned the app that the Vodworks team are working on, and it's around wellness. Well, we need to make sure that we're speaking to people who actually are interested in those products. So roughly 1 in 5 people in the UK is sort of interested in those types. So we want to make sure we're speaking to them rather than people that just don't like the concept, because then they might be actually telling us more about the concept rather than our product. So just think carefully who you're speaking to, why, etc., and then your numbers based on that. Then this is the how, and this is the, well, how do you collect data? Now, you want to make sure there's a whole range of different things. So I'll talk you through these. We've got here flagged in red the quantitative elements. So, your surveys, be they, and other things, and also the qualitative side. So the first thing to say is both qualitative and quantitative have what we call self-administered. So where the individual, your participant, does it by themselves, and then where you have the researcher administered, where the research is there to help them. And I'll talk a little bit about the pros and cons to each of those and what you need to think about. So there's that. There's also then the online and the offline elements, and so you might somewhere, if people don't have internet access and stuff, you might need to go with paper questionnaires or go and do your questionnaire face to face with people so you can help, or you might be able to use online surveys and the tech tools right now, like, so if you've got, even if you use Google Forms or a Survey Monkey or something that you can use, the really nice thing is that as data is coming in, it's visualizing that for you. So you're basically able to just see the graphs, the analysis in real time. It's you know, like Sakib said, tech has made this a lot easier and more accessible now. We use other survey platforms more for more complex routing and other stuff for our surveys, but you can use something like this. It's accessible, often free, and it's, yeah, a nice way to do it. Whereas with paper surveys, you've got that kind of lag. You go out and give the surveys, you can't really see your data until everything comes back and then you input it and stuff. So tech definitely is a really good one for that. In terms of online qualitative, well, you can do where you can't necessarily do face-to-face interviews. We've got stuff like, you know, here, Zoom, etc. has been great for those sorts of things. We use specific online community software, which is like, you know, people can interact. But if you can't use that, what you can, you know, if you've got a Facebook page, for example, you might be able to get, you know, people having a dialogue on there, or like WhatsApp group chats and stuff. So we even use that in some harder to access markets. It's just being aware, for example, if you've got that Facebook group, or your Facebook page for your organization, you're maybe only really going to get the what we call vocal minority, so the people that are super happy or super not happy. So you miss that in the middle. So just again, remembering the biases in terms of who is responding. And I mean, I work a lot with, like I said, music artists and dance influencers, and it's amazing because they have like 50, 60, 100,000 followers sometimes, and they can put up an Insta story poll and within minutes have thousands of people responding. And of course, again, thousands of people, not necessarily representative of the whole population, but that's a lot of people. And that still gives you a lot of really interesting insight to make your decisions off. So, you know, if you do an Insta story poll with 10 people or 1,000 that are not quite representative, what I want to get across is don't put your budget against what they've said. Just bear in mind, of course, the biases that might be there, but it's really, really powerful way of you being able to get data. So a couple of additional bits here. So language, making sure, again, you want to be able to make this accessible for people so you don't block certain people from taking part. So if you need to, make sure your questions, you can translate them, that they're administered to people in the right language. When we did work in the refugee camps, we had, I think, 11 languages, and we had interpreters with us as well, so that everyone has the opportunity to take part, especially like in something like that. If you're having to do it in someone, you know, not in their strongest language, just make sure you keep it simple. Then in that case, you can still do it, but keep it simple and be aware. And then yes, internet access. If you've got internet enabled data collection, can make it super quick. But if you need people that don't have internet access, think of other ways. So SMS or face-to-face. Anonymity, and this is a really important one hopefully for many of you, because you may not necessarily be able to go in, like I said, speak to representative samples and go and get someone else to gather them for you. You might be speaking to people or asking for advice or help or feedback from people that you know. You might be there, so therefore they might feel uncomfortable being honest with you, and so they might give what we call socially desirable answers, which are just saying, yes, it's all brilliant. And then you're actually, then again, you're off because you got the wrong information, and you might think it's all great, but it's not quite. So being aware of that. But even, you know, I've been reading quite a bit from one of the founders of LinkedIn saying when they were first starting it up, quite honestly, they only had friends and family to go to. So there's a real benefit to that, because these people will give you their time. So maybe just say to them, look, I don't mind you being honest with me, like, please be honest with me, and that can help too. And then, like we said, so the secondary data or the indirect data collection, so app usage data, other data you gather from your platform, and go on. One of my favorite things to do, and sadly with COVID it's a little bit challenging, but it's just to get out in the field and to observe it myself. Go see what's going on, understand, is there an issue here, or actually that's great. So that's a really, really fun, nice way to really just get involved. So yeah, those are the kind of basic principles of research that I wanted to get across, and hopefully it's given you sort of a sort of snapshot. What we're going to do now is Melanie bring you in to talk specifically about the tourism incubator, and then we'll discuss some of the case studies.
Actually, before we go to that bit, did you want to maybe answer a couple of questions?
Yes, no, absolutely, for sure. Always love questions. Go for it, Sakib.
Okay.
I do. I really like questions.
So there is one question which I like quite a lot. Okay, so the first question is, what do you mean by informal research design?
Yes, good point. I know, hopefully, well, I really should have made that clearer, sorry. So, well, let's go back to that slide. And it's difficult. By formal, what I mean is all of the elements that I've discussed there, like super formal. So making sure you're sampling, you've got the exact numbers of people, and you've got like, you're making sure it's accessible to everyone. So that's where you might need bigger survey platforms, more people, etc. You might need a research company to come in. Whereas if you're doing that piece of research more informally, you might, maybe have less people, you might use a Google Forms, or you might go and just talk to some people. So you're not necessarily having something really super structured, but you're still gathering insight. It's just in a little bit more of a, what we call, I guess, triangulated sometimes. So you're getting a bit of insight here, a bit of insight there, or very simply, it might be a survey where rather than having 1,000 people or 500 people, you've got 50 or 30 or something. So it's kind of, hopefully that it's just, I guess, toning it down a little bit, or having a sort of smaller version of what you could do in a more formal way. Hopefully that helps. And it is case by case specific, depending on what you're looking at.
Okay, cool. Does the person who answered that question, does that answer the question you asked? Could just put it in the chat.
Yeah, go for it. And we can take more. It is a tricky thing to get across, but yes, for sure, let us know if that did. I'm happy to cover it in a little bit more detail. Okay, so another person has asked the question, could you introduce some tools for digital collection with less cost and the most convenience? Yeah, for sure. So maybe some examples of some tools like SurveyMonkey, etc. Yes, so you've got, of course, yes, SurveyMonkey. SurveyMonkey is free up to a certain number of responses. Google Forms, I think, is free generally, so and it's great, and you get the data back in real time, like I said, as well as with SurveyMonkey. The thing with some of those is, and here back to the formal informal, sometimes we'll need to actually have lots of different types of people in our surveys, and we'll need to ask sub questions to certain groups. So if someone says yes to this, they might need to answer a whole set of different things. These tools don't allow you to necessarily have as complex routing in the free versions, at least. So you want to keep your survey questions and your design quite simple in that sense as well. So again, a little less formal, whereas we can do quite advanced things in the other survey platforms. But they're great. Definitely use those. We use them a lot quite as well at work, where we're in my job, where we're looking at, we're doing more informal stuff ourselves. Like I mentioned, if you've got an Instagram page or you've got a Facebook page, doing quick polls on that or Insta story polls and stuff can give you a lot of really good insight. If you do have a company Facebook page, a lot of my clients, they get so much feedback on that, people talking about their trips, their holidays, giving insight. Of course, you want to be careful with the management. That can, if you do have a few unhappy people, of course, they will express themselves potentially there. But that's a really good tool of being able to do that research, and actually for you to be able to follow up with people and say, hi, you didn't have such a great experience. Could we have a conversation with you? Could we learn more? Or the opposite, you had a great experience. Could we ask you some more? So again, it's just giving you access to more people as well. So definitely recommend those tools. And maybe, Sakib, we can chat about this later with the stuff you're doing with the incubator, but yeah, how we can incorporate more tech solutions as well. Okay, cool. There are some more questions. We do have a Q&A section towards the end of the material. So if it's okay with you guys, I will come back to that, and we'll take on some more questions at that point. Sounds good. Okay, so Melanie, over to you if you want to talk about the incubator.
So I'm jumping in to bring a case study, but we're gonna do like what the research that can be done with free of a startup that we are currently supporting. But to give you a bit of background before we introduce you to the startup, these startups are part of our Khmer Tourism for the Future incubator that is supported by the Ministry of Tourism of Cambodia and Khmer Enterprise. And you might say like, why tourism in time of COVID? And actually, this is actually Cambodia was, I would say, until last week, we didn't really have any COVID cases. So the travel across the country still happened, and a lot of companies had to move to targeting the local market. And so the incubator we created is also to support these teams to move from maybe international market to the domestic market. And so far, actually, there were quite little information about domestic market behavior. So that comes to the topic of today of like, okay, how can we also like, in their case, what are the questions they can start asking themselves to identify the profile of their new customer and their behavior? And just to add a bit more on the program, so what we do is that we support them by giving them access to master classes, to fundings up to $5,000, personal coaching to grow them as leaders, but also mentorship, network and connection. We had also a field trip where we went to an island in the south to hack the island and also do more market research about the opportunities for them to expand there. And some like the demo day at the end of the program. And another last thing that is also very important, actually, we are partnering with Vodworks on this as well. Vodworks is also providing free like in-kind support website development for free of the teams as well to develop their website and app. So yes, so over to you, Sania, or maybe you want me to give you quickly.
Yes, we'll go on to, yeah, go. So this is the first.
So we focus on like free startups of that are currently in our incubator program. So we have Solo Landscape. So for those who don't know yet, this is a really great startup focused on, they started actually before COVID, but they boomed during COVID, like their sales really increased a lot. They are focusing on like adventure tourism and to bring youth, especially in small groups, to the mountain, to the forest, and every time like bringing these like eco-friendly tourism behaviors. So educating also about like how can we be a more responsible tourist, what is the impact of tourism in the landscape and the community, and always having like some exciting leadership games also in the program. So over to you, Sania.
Yeah, great. So this is a really interesting one. And this is where your users, whether your first pilot users, whatever they might be, but they can be incredibly powerful because of their passion for your area that you're looking at. So the first thing to say is though, make sure you're speaking to the right ones. So someone might have gone on the trip that really wasn't that into adventure, and then they're going to say, well, it wasn't great. Partly maybe they were scared, maybe it was something like that. But if, for example, in the initial testing, they wanted to find some people and say, hey, can you go on these adventure trips and then feed back to us? So again, make sure you've got people that are interested in that area. And then once they go, you can find out in detail about their experiences. And I think they can also give them quite a lot of important insight, interesting insight into other trips that people can, they might be able to put on, or other things that they might find interesting in terms of adventures. Yeah, so, okay, that's that one. And then, or Melanie, anything on this that you want to add or anything? We can go into the next.
Very good.
Okay.
Next startup, yes, so this is Untitled. So this is a web platform, a booking platform for travel operators, guide and tourist attraction to sell their tickets and their prestation, the services online. So really focusing on the Cambodian market and also trying to source some like experience that are usually not online and to help them access to markets.
Okay. Yes. So this is where you can start using. So as we mentioned, it's a tech platform, so you can start using some analytics that you might get from the actual platform itself. So you might get a sense of who's going on, who seems to be interested in what you're offering. So you'll probably be able to see from analytics their location, potentially their demographics, etc. So that will give you some insight into your target or potential customers. It's also an important, you can also use secondary data that might be collected from the tourism board or somewhere, for example, to give you a sense of, which international customers are maybe your most frequently visited or most likely to maybe come on these trips, which countries may they be from. And then you can, ideally, if possible, you could speak to someone or speak to a few people from those countries to get a sense of, okay, what would they need help with, what might they be worried about, actually what are the really things that they're excited about. So yeah, if you can get hold of those customers, but first of all using a bit of that secondary data to help you understand who those potential customers might be. And of course then once you do have customers, you can get feedback from people that have used your service as well. But so this is just more in kind of the initial phase as you're trying to understand what the product could look like. Okay, and then our last one.
And last one, very exciting startup as well. It's called Aystone. And so they started with a realization that handicraft is what people really appreciate when they come on holiday. And actually, but sometimes people don't understand like how much effort have been made to do this small handicraft and what is the technique behind, what is the history behind. So they come up with this idea of matching people making some handicraft, artisans, they call them, and international travelers, and for them to develop some kind of master classes where for a few hours, the artisan can share the skills and with the tourists. And it's a good way to pass on some more information and at the same time, like make people understand better like this culture and this heritage, and also get more, I would say, like once people join the masterclass, they pay for the time of the master, but also they will be more likely to buy more handicraft once they know the story. So now they are actually like, they are mostly targeting for international tourists. And they are currently during this COVID time trying to source more and more artisans to be ready once COVID stops one day, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah. And so this is again where I think your potential customers, getting a sense from them. So I guess international travelers might be coming to a country with a certain mindset about, oh, if I'm going to India, it'd be interesting to look at, I don't know, the clothes making or something, or entertainment. So they're coming with that mindset. So it might be interesting to first know, what do people associate with when they're coming to Cambodia, for example? What sort of things would they like to have masterclasses on? So it could help you source your initial masters and then build out from that, because actually you don't probably just want to cater to what people's perceptions are, you want to broaden out too. But maybe you'll get an initial understanding once you can say to them, oh, we've got this and this, then they might get interested in also the other elements that you can bring. Again here, platform analytics, because you'll understand who's going on the website, who's tending to book, and get a sense of which countries again they might be coming from, and things to focus on. And then like I said earlier, observation's amazing. So maybe observing some people while they're at the masterclass or doing a few yourself can be a really good way to kind of get involved. So thank you, Melanie, and that's basically us on the case studies.
I just before you finish, I just want to add a couple of points. I mean, we were talking about platform analytics and things like this. we work on, like I was saying earlier on, we work with startups, but we also work with enterprise companies who have millions of users and things like this. And there's a great number of people that we've worked with who still pin a lot of their analytics and a lot of their information based on using tools like Google Analytics, which obviously is free for the vast majority of people. It's a very, very powerful tool. If you set up how you are identifying your data and how you're tagging your data that's coming out from whether it's your website or whether it's an app or something of that sort, you can get very, very powerful information that can feed that knowledge of how effective your product is and who it's most effective to. So I thought it was just a point worth putting in. There are other tools other than Google Analytics, but if you guys have any questions around that, we can take that offline. Just drop us an email or something of that sort, and then we can answer those questions for you there.
For sure. Great.
Am I the host?
Sorry,
again?
guys, I'm aware you are the host. I think so. And my apologies. I know I talk a little bit fast, so hopefully now in these 15 minutes, if there's anything that you want me to go over or generally ask questions, we're here.
Cool. So should we go back to maybe some questions? There are 3 questions there. I'm going to try and answer this question as best as I can. Does doing sampling is fair enough? So I'm going to assume, does sampling still have a role within market research, and how effective it is as a tool of being able to get an understanding of your target audience?
Sampling? Oh gosh, yes, I will get in huge trouble if I've not made that clear from like the research, whatever, godfathers. No, sampling is critical. It's but what I wanted to get across is that you do, for certain things, need to be very structured. So if you're doing national research, like I mentioned, that's going in the press, if we're doing multi-country research, we, for example, look at music consumption behaviors and habits in 21 countries each year. We have to have the exact right quotas, the right structure of the population in each of the countries that we cover. You cannot get that wrong. But when you are doing it more informally, you won't necessarily have the means to speak to 70 people who are females in a certain area aged 18 to 24. You won't be able to get that exact measure. So you're then taking a slightly lighter touch informal approach to that. So you might just have less people, but you're always aware of who you've included and who you've not included, and actually how that might impact your decision making. You're doing it, of course, for yourself. I often, design these pieces of research and will get I have to go and argue as to why this is the way to do it. So I'm always getting questioned on that from clients when we're pitching something or presenting and stuff. So we have to be very, very, very strict on the way we go about it. But when you're doing it for yourself, you don't have to be as strict. But of course, like I mentioned, if you're putting a lot of money or something behind decisions based on your research, make sure you're very aware of what you have done, what you haven't done, and how that could impact your type of information you get.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So the next question is, there are many issues researchers have to be careful about, it seems. Do you have any recommendations for people who don't have professional researchers? Is there anything that they can do by themselves to better understand the market?
Yeah, really good point. So hopefully some of these, like we said, observations and things are great. Try something, speak to a few people, just like, as we say, like dip your toe in the water, maybe do a small survey, play around. But and then you can do some reading, and I guess you can just Google around as well, just to get a general understanding about the industry, about your area. Like I mentioned, there's lots of secondary research that's already been done that can tell you a lot about your market, that then you might not even need to do a lot of it yourself. Whether it's tourism, for example, there's so much research around that held by the tourism board or market intelligence bodies, and it's often really very much free. So do that, watch some videos, etc. as well. And then just go and talk to some people. So they do, when you're in my sort of, a field and you've got clients and stuff, we do have to be really mindful, and it can make you really like paranoid, but you don't, not when you're needing to do it for yourself, like enjoy it is, just be aware that, yes, okay, I've spoken to these people. It's not everyone I could have spoken to, but I decided not to, or I can't, so just get started with it. Yeah, I think just use what you have.
I just want to add a point to that as well. As I said, we've worked with startups and stuff, and one of the things we find is that sometimes you have startups who go 100% down the market research side before they even do anything, and so they tend to be static for a while. And then on the other side, you have people who go gung-ho without doing any research, and they think the product's going to work, and they just go straight to market, and then they start coming across their challenges. And the truth is, the answer actually sits somewhere in between those 2 points. Obviously, we did that app with happy highlights and stuff. It's a good example. We decided that, okay, we take our best guess, we collect a little bit of information, we do a little bit of research, and then we push the product to market, and then we collect feedback really quickly.
Yeah.
Now, if you're building something which is technologically pivoted, you have the ability to build something which is more concise and potentially like in the form of a functional proof of concept, as we call it. And you can take it to market, you can test your theory, you can get feedback before you've actually had to invest a great deal of money. And you can use that as a way to pivot information gathering as well.
Yes, definitely. And I think with the app, that's been quite a learning, because as much as I would be saying to you, go and speak to 1,000 people, we can't. So it's like, hey, we've got these 10, 15 people who are friends and family, let's get them to give us some insight, and the value of just that small amount of people using something and giving you that insight. Because when you're so close to a product and so passionate about it, like it's you can't sometimes see some of the things that you need someone to tell you. It is hard to, I think, hear that feedback sometimes, but it's important that you get that. So yeah, like I said, it's somewhere in the middle, and you can start off quite easily with it.
Okay, so we have a question for Melanie. Data collection can be quite challenging in Cambodia when it comes from official data published by government agencies. Yep. How's the experience so far for Impact Hub in handling this issue?
Yes, data is really hard to collect. So what we do is we have quite good relationship with some of the research agencies like Qantas, or they are producing some report every year on consumer behavior. So we try to get the report, and then we can share it with our startup community. Another way is actually looking, secondary data is one thing, but we mostly encourage all our startups to do primary data collection, to go and ask directly the consumer, to try to be creative in collecting the answer. Facebook is a good way to you post on your own Facebook, then you make a survey where you can get more people filling an online survey. It depends at which stage actually, but we always encourage a mix of face-to-face data collection and online data collection. I think what I realized is the design of the question is really key for success. It has to be very clear, not misleading, being sure that we targeted the right people who answer the survey, and you're not getting any information from people you don't want to get the information from. And also, I think it depends also on your target audience. Knowing where they are, knowing very well your customer persona is the first key of having good quality data, knowing where they hang out. And I think also one thing we recommend is not just doing a survey and asking people, but also observe like is really key. Like by observing, you can really understand a lot of like behaviors and things that people tell you that they are doing, but actually it's not. And doing this small hack, like when they say, yeah, I have access to internet, and then you go to the location, you do a quick check of like how is the speed, and actually does actually people have access to internet or not. So it depends, like it's a combination of different techniques. I would say you have to be creative. You have to don't rely too much on like old data. I think also be careful of too old data, because Cambodia changed so fast, so that maybe some data that was valid 5 years ago are not
or 10 minutes ago.
Yes. So yeah, these are, I would say, some of my insight from being here and supporting startups, doing market research.
Okay, thanks for that, Melanie. All right, so we have quite a few questions. So and we have about 5 minutes to knock them out. So let us try and pick some questions. You mentioned you have experiences in data collection in different countries. Does the questionnaire, is it the same, or does it need to be adjusted for the social context of the country?
Oh, brilliant question. Largely, we try to keep the core questions the same, so you can make comparisons. But yes, we will do what we call like localized. So for example, certain options. So if we're looking at music, the streaming services are different in each market. The genres are often different. So we'll localize all of those. But absolutely, there are some questions that may not be appropriate in certain markets. You might need to ask a bit differently, or you might need to have like the core, 90-80% of the questionnaire might be the same, but an additional 20% that's focused just on the local context. Yeah, so you do always localize. How much depends on kind of what you're doing.
Cool, thank you, Sania. All right, so we have a question. I find designing the questions very difficult. How do you design questions? It's a big question, actually, on its own.
Question, Melanie. We'll get your thought. Yeah, that is an awesome question. Melanie, please do jump in as well. Right, I draw stuff. I like to think about my questionnaires or whatever as like a map. So I draw a spider diagram. What are the topics? What are the data points that I need? So once you've got that, then you've got a bit of a flow of your questionnaire. But then, yes, like Melanie said, you don't want to bias one way or another and be like, do you like my product? Yes or no? And be standing in front of someone asking that, right? There's more subtle ways of asking that. So it could be how you might use a scale. How appealing is this product to you? How useful has it been? So for that, I'll say do some research. Google on like questionnaire design. Things like SurveyMonkey, actually, they're very good because they give you a bank of questions a whole bunch that you can use in your own research. So I'll definitely shout out to SurveyMonkey there and give that a go, because it can help you if you want to look at lifestyle, etc., or appeal. There's a whole bunch there for you to choose from.
Cool, thanks.
And I will add a few things. Yeah. I think for us is like we recommend, especially when it's like one-to-one interviews, we consider start with understanding the current experience, understanding what is the frustration. This is like the pain that you want to solve later. So ask them to share some stories about the pain, all the bad experience that they used to have. Then try to understand what are the current alternatives. How are they currently solving this problem? What do they like or dislike about this? What will them make their life easier? Ask for their suggestion. And also try to understand, capture data about how big is the market, who else do you know have the same problem? How often do they have to experience this problem? How much would you be, are they currently paying to solve this problem? And finally, capture some data about to keep in touch, because this is also something that maybe you are collected a lot of data from the people who are replying to your survey. If they feel comfortable, then you can ask a small box of would you be interested in being in touch when the product is released? And this is a good way also to find your first customers when your product is released, and to thank them also for their contribution.
Definitely.
Fantastic. All right, we're going to take one more question, and then I think we can wrap up. And I apologize if I keep on jumping around because I'm trying to multitask and I'm clearly not very good at it. All right, so from Yvette, user personas are a great tool that she uses day to day, but are there any other templates or standard applications you can use to start off as a guide to asking the right questions? Maybe that ties in a little bit to the last one as well.
Yeah, I think Melanie answered it really well. And yes, user personas are great for you to conceptualize the types of people and thinking about how you do that. We have, again, actually, like Melanie just described, it's kind of like the funnel approach. So whether you're doing your qualitative or your quantitative, think broad. First of all, get to know that person a bit, their context, then start going more specific into your product stuff, making sure you've got, what are their alternatives? What are the competitors? So like I said, that kind of mind map, think about the journey and think about as in for the questionnaire and the type of data that you need, and just making sure you're picking all of that up, because also people don't have almost like loads of time necessarily to give you to take part in your survey, and often pilots, people are doing you a favor. Make sure you're asking the right questions, you're not taking too much of their time, you're getting the actual data points that you need. It doesn't have to be super long, it can be short, but just make sure it's targeted.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, cool. All right, let's round up. And you know, if there are any final words that you guys would like to share with the team, any like kind of final thoughts of wisdom, if you had to put, actually, let's make it a bit more challenging for you. Actually, if you had to put, like, in the subject of this conversations that we've had today, if you had to put like a one line to summarize it that people should walk away with, one point, what would it be for you? You can take a second to think about it.
Okay, no, I've got mine, right. I'm ready.
He's going to say Google Analytics.
No, I'm not. Mine is a nod to my favorite sports brand, which is Nike, which is just do it, is what I kind of want to, you know, the tagline there is to get across, like, you know, I want people to feel excited about this. It's interesting, it's fun, and it's really powerful, but it doesn't have to be really hard. Just be aware of what you're doing and the gaps, the blind spots. But yeah, just do it is what I'm ending with. Please, just do it. Yeah.
And I would say, like, be curious. Like, I think like by doing research, you might be exposed to understanding problems more in depth, seeing more opportunities. So be open to capture, like, grabbing these opportunities along the way, and don't only stick with a questionnaire. Like, see like what comes to you, like how the person you're interviewing is reacting, and yeah, don't be afraid to talk to people. This is like what will make you want to do more, like will push you to build a solution now, because the more you speak to people, you feel like, oh my God, the problem is actually very big. And it will like push you to actually like solve this problem faster and work now on your solution. So it's like a source of motivation as well.
Thank you, guys. Well, I'll say my one. Mine was when I first started this business, my father turned around and said one sentence to me that I've continued with the whole time, is don't wear your heart on your sleeve. You know, when you're trying to achieve your objectives, it's very challenging, it's very difficult. Even in the context of research, you will fail on collecting the information you need. Don't take it personally, just bounce back, as Gordon Ramsay says. Bounce back and understand that things like research and even business itself on its own, in its separate entity, it is a very iterative process. So don't take anything personally, just work out where it failed, be okay with failing, accept it, and then do better the next time. All right, cool. Well, I think we've rounded up now, and I am very grateful to the attendees. You know, we got up to like 60+ people, and you know, you guys have held on with us all the way past the hour mark. So thank you very much for that. Do you ladies want to say last comments to the audience?
No, just thank you, everyone. And I know that, Melanie, you'll be having the slides to share. I don't know if, well, the presentation will be available, I guess. But yeah, thank you, everyone, for coming. It's been really nice to do.
Thank you so much. And keep exploring.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much. Feel free to drop any questions that you have that we didn't cover to webinars@vodworks.com, and I'll make sure that it's propagated. Contact information of these two wonderful women are on the webinar page. I've shared that in the chat. And so again, thank you very much from all of us. Thank you for joining, and I hope you guys got some really useful information out of it. And there will be more to come. So fingers crossed we can meet up again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care, guys. Have a good day.